Entry 01, June 4th, 2185, 9:44 a.m. Democratic Standard Time. Good morning. I'm Dr. Whitaker, member of the Ministry of Research and Development and lead director for the Department of Helldiver Regiment Investigation. Firstly, I'd like to make our mission goal clear by stating one fact before we move on. Helldivers, as given within the high hierarchy within the SEAF military structure, can and will have the freedom to organize and assemble with one another. This in turn allows them to create groups. These groups are known as regiments or units, and these said regiments fill out specific roles needed for the Galactic War. Let me first state that I do not disapprove of these actions. In fact, they are quite encouraged for Helldivers to assemble. However, there's a slight problem when it comes to this. Given the sheer vast expansion of new Helldiver recruits every day, and the formation of these groups appear, you're bound to get lost within the vast network. A regiment's history, strategic value, and even the knowledge of its existence is now at risk of being lost to time forever. This is the reason as to why this department and I were made, to properly document these regiments and let them be known, although, depending on who and what allegiance they hail to, will determine the confidentiality of said document. I am pleased to say that I am looking forward to these series of events, and today, for this entry alone, I will walk you through on how I will approach to accomplish such a task. Number 1. Search within popular Helldiver comm links. That's mostly where they share their groups and assemblies. 2. Document the regiment's stories, accomplishments, histories, and role within these files. 3. Given that Super Earth knows of my past hobbies, they requested that I print and paint miniatures dedicated to the group to act as a physical and visual reference. I'll admit, the task at hand given unto me is most peculiar, but it's a task well worth my time. With all the introductions put aside, I think it's best we move on to our first regiment we will discuss today, albeit it may come across as controversial among the board. The Chaosdivers. Let me explain as to why I chose the Chaosdivers to be the first regiment to cover. Despite Super Earth's best efforts to censor the very existence of the Chaosdivers, it is without a shadow of the doubt the most common and well-known regiment amongst the Helldivers. Even newly recruited Helldivers are likely to discover the Chaosdivers before learning any other regiment. For those of you who are not aware as to why this decision will be disagreed upon, it's best to discuss as to who and what the Chaosdivers are, and you can come to your own conclusion. I'd like to discuss as to how I think the idea of the Chaosdivers first came to be. Around the time of May 2nd, 2184, the strength of the Helldivers were in full force, valiantly defending Super Earth from a two-front war, automatons and terminates. However, on May 3rd, the Ministry of Science and Development decided to forward a decision that would be integrated within the Helldiver framework. All Helldivers from this point on moving forward would be required to create a PlayStation Network account, or PSN, in order to continue service as a Helldiver. The caveat to this was that PSN accounts were allegedly known for repeated events of breaches of security, revealing sensitive information of the person owning the account. And more puzzling was that this wasn't required before. Why now? Of course, nearly all of the Helldivers were angered gravely with this change. This began a great protest headed by Helldivers. They began review bombing administrative buildings, openly calling out those who forwarded the bill for this change, and most daring of all, they purposefully lost battles and allowed their enemies to gain more territory so they could invade Super Earth. Luckily for the Helldivers, this protest did work, somewhat. The bill for PSN accounts was receded, and Helldivers were free to continue their service without the need for a PSN account. However, there were still regions of space that were still unable to enlist into the Helldiver program, because of the new laws and regulations set in place by the Council. Regardless, I like to focus attention to the subject of purposeful endangerment of Super Earth as part of the protest. It surprises me that despite the Helldivers who allowed the enemy to progress, They were not prosecuted, given as to how serious of a crime it is to lead to the destruction of our home planet. In any case, the Galactic War continued on from this point, but I feel that's not the entire story. Maybe, just maybe, that the Helldivers who put Super Earth at risk had awoken something inside not known before. Maybe they wanted to continue the protest. Maybe they liked seeing Super Earth at risk. Just maybe. They liked the idea of seeing Super Earth fall, and thus, the Chaosdivers were born.
I'm not a big fan of the government. 30 on 30. I'm not a big fan of the government. 30 on 30 on 30. I'm not a big fan of the government. 30, 30, 30. I'm not a big fan of the government. Not a big fan.
Of course, what I said was all speculation. There is no definitive answer as to what the origins of the Chaosdivers are, but it's a likely theory that I stand on. Now, let me discuss as to what is confirmed to be true about the Chaosdivers. I sent a spy out from our department to investigate the Chaosdivers and live amongst their ranks. I recently got back a report from him, and this is what I gathered. The Chaosdivers are a rebellious group who fight for true freedom, believing that Super Earth is a corrupt government who brainwash its inhabitants. The Chaosdivers seek to break this system, replacing it with ideas of self-governance, autonomy to the colonies, and true freedom. They seek to end the Galactic War via reforming Super Earth's government, and they achieve this goal through sending spies into Super Earth's network of high political positions, spreading misinformation, and lastly, spreading propaganda to nearby colonies. One thing I'd like to note is their focus on dismantling Super Earth as a governing power rather than the individuals that reside within it. Despite being rogues, they still hold reverence to their past experience as a Helldiver. Reports coming from bands of Helldivers report teammates taking casualties from supposed members of the Chaosdivers who engaged in combat with them. Clearly, the Chaosdivers have not made a good name for themselves, but when hearing their side of things, they get a little more interesting. Instead of denying these claims, the Chaosdivers recognize these events and have officially stated that they do not support these actions. Anyone who claims to be a Chaosdiver when killing Helldivers is shunned by the community. Whether this is just another ploy to distract people from the true nature of the Chaosdivers, or they truly do disapprove of these members, I am not entirely sure. Their main headquarters is stationed on Rogue 5, a jungle planet that sits in the outer fringes of the galaxy, making it a strategic spot to station a rebellion against Super Earth. But don't let this backwater planet fool you. The Chaosdivers have the chance of becoming a formidable foe against Super Earth, even having their own fleet. The Eris Proving Grounds, which was a massive asteroid used as a mining facility and was hollowed out from the inside due to its rich iron deposit, it now serves as a hub for miners to collect valuable resources. Except most of those resources now go to the Chaosdivers, allowing them to craft weapons, armor, and even ships. It's a delicate secret that must be kept a secret at any cost by the Chaosdivers, until now. What I find most intriguing about the Chaosdivers has to do with the founding members of the Chaosdivers, the Council of Five, as they are dubbed. As in the name, the Council of Five includes 5 members that remain a mystery as to who they really are. Even the highest-ranking members do not know much about the Council. Some doubt if they are the original members, or if they were ex-Helldivers turned traitors, or maybe they don't even exist at all. If these elusive figures do indeed exist, however, their orders are filtered down and spread apart, working their way through the command structure. They give the Chaosdivers goals and hold the spirit of the Chaosdivers together, despite their secretive nature. Lastly, I'd like to discuss my own curiosity to the group. It's true that ex-Helldivers have joined the Chaosdivers. It's also true that if a Helldiver is declared traitor, whether that be killing too many civilians or fleeing battle, they will be targeted by their own ship and are declared kill on sight. I coined this term to be the traitor lock. How the ex-Helldivers managed to bypass this lock is unknown to me. Clearly, there's a lot more involved with the Chaosdivers than I can unravel within this entry. such as their culture and divisions, but I think I've explained enough. If you wish to learn more, I suggest you go to them yourselves within their com link. Link is within the footer page of this document. Now, we can move on to my most favorite part of these entries, painting miniatures. Firstly, I'd like to make something very clear. These miniatures that I design are my renditions. They do not fully represent the group. I'm not fixing the regiment, I am merely making a depiction. Also, despite being traitors, I suggest that you do not attack this group directly. From this point on, moving forward, remember this fair warning well. Now then, let me discuss some of the design choices I made. When I first heard the Chaosdivers, I imagined a rebellion against a large military might would be a little poor. When it comes to their equipment, scavenged equipment, black market weapons, etc. It was also at this time that I was aware of their home planet of Rogue 5 being a jungle planet, which gave me reminders of the mid-20th century war, Vietnam. It also wouldn't surprise me to find out if some bands of Chaosdivers decided to make trade deals with the automatons, thus allowing Chaosdivers to receive automaton augmentations. Mind you, I had already made these design choices before fully knowing the Chaosdivers, so excuse me for the vastly different image I make. With all this being said, jungle-themed, scavenging, and automaton augmentations, I officially came to conclusion of my own band of Chaosdivers. A band of pirates who raid sea supply routes implemented with automaton parts. I was mainly inspired by this piece, made by @Jorn_ on Twitter. A very foreboding image. I also had the idea of a sword arm taken from one of the automaton conscripts. Jungle-themed cyborg rebel pirates for my warband. Very nice. I first started off with a black primer paint. These models are mostly going to be colored black, so makes the most sense to me. Keep in mind that this was my very first time using an airbrush, and it's not exactly the highest quality one. Given the available space and budget of this department, I don't exactly have luxurious items that the other departments do. Regardless, I'm making sure that I get good coverage on these models, getting them below, from the top, sides, etc. Painting a model pure black, however, can be troublesome, so I do a zenithal of dark gray to trick the eye into seeing black. It still leaves the crevices pure black from the priming before. A lot of people tend to highlight the top of the model and call it a day, but there's more you can do with a zenithal. You can assign more light to a certain part to give it more importance and make it eye-catching. So I'm spraying more paint on areas where I want viewers to look more, usually the helmet and the capes. So as you can see here, I'm spraying a lot more paint on the top of the model, catching the back of the cape as well. This next part I'm doing is called dry brushing. Using a pure white paint, I dry it off on a piece of cardboard and then flick the brush against the hardest edges. This gives the model an outline and is easier to read. This also helps to give the model a more natural lighting, as dry brushing on the raised parts of the cape gives it a more natural look. Now, for me being foolish, I forgot to record myself painting the accents on the armor. There's still some footage of that later on, but you'll have to excuse me for now. What I'm doing here is called Object Source Lighting, or OSL, and when done correctly, replicates items that glow and shine off the model. This Chaos Diver here has his left arm replaced with twin energy blades from an automaton. So I start with a base of a deep red. See how the paint subtly sprays onto the leg and the upper arm? That's what I hope to achieve. What I'm doing now is spraying in the center of the blade, where the most energy and heat will be generated. I'm using a sort of bubblegum pink color in this airbrush to signify the brightest part of the blade. Now, I'm spraying the arm with red to lessen the center part of the blade a little bit, to give the illusion that the light is fading away further out. This segment here was the most difficult for me to paint. What I'm doing is called freehanding, and it's drawing custom logos using only your brush. It's a very advanced technique and certainly not one to fit my current skill level. Regardless, it was still joyous for me to try. What I'm doing here is sketching out the outline for the logo to act as a guide to where I should paint, although I found it quite difficult to draw lines and curves on such an uneven surface. What I'm attempting to do is to recreate the Fallen Hero's Vengeance cape, given only unto those served in the Malevelon Creek campaigns. The idea of a Creek veteran becoming jaded afterwards and defecting to the side of the Chaosdivers is an idea that was too good for me to pass. Looks a little goofy, but hey, it's here. Now what I'm doing is painting the visors with a brass color. I originally thought of painting the visors either red or orange, but I'm not good at painting visors, and brass was a more neutral color that better fits with the color scheme. It was also easier to work with. Another tip I discovered when painting small lines is to use flow improver in the paint. Supposedly it helps paint smoother lines without the paint spreading out too much, making the paint more controllable and smooth. It helps a lot when you're painting small details, but if you are painting small lines like commonly seen in the Helldivers, I'd recommend picking up colored ink. Thinning your paints to the right consistency to paint small lines is very difficult and often looks faded when dried. Ink, on the other hand, looks more vibrant even when it's dried. Now, I'm back to airbrushing again, this time for the bases. I found these jungle-themed bases that fit perfectly for the planet of Rogue 5. I start off priming them black, then slowly layering on colors. Same process as before, making sure I get every angle. Starting off with brown as the initial layer. This will be the jungle floor. I noticed that the paint was much harder to get out this time, which was strange because I clean my airbrush every time I switch out to a different color. After every session, I quickly clean the airbrush about 5 or 6 times. Even after doing a deep clean, I still found difficulty getting paint out. I don't know if it was because Vallejo doesn't work well with airbrushing, or I wasn't thinning my paints enough. Regardless, I still managed to accomplish what I needed. Also, my apologies for the unstable camera work. What I'm doing here is spraying Army Painter Speed Paint brown. What I think would accomplish here is to give the ground a more humid and moist look, given how jungles are usually very warm and humid environments. The paint in this came out very free and smooth. Now what I'm doing is adding the next layer, a dark olive green, a very dark and natural color that would help for the dark and shaded recesses. Next layer is a part of the same olive green tree, this time much lighter. Then, for the last layer, I use a mix of green and yellow to make this yellowish lime color. It reminded me a lot of snake venom, which is fitting given the jungle setting we are set in. It gave the bases this more look of a toxic environment. Then, for this final step in the painting phase, I paint the small little mushrooms red, to give the environment a more poisonous look than before. I also highlight some of the ferns with a pale olive green. After 2 weeks of printing, painting, and assembling, I have a solid depiction of Chaosdivers, a band of rebellious freedom fighters who do not adhere to the restrictions of Super Earth, augmented with outlawed technology and raids seek supply routes for their resources. Despite my albeit amateurish nature, I'm very proud of how these models came to be. It was a joy designing them all. This will conclude our first entry. I'll cycle through some of the minis for you to observe, but for now, this is where I get off. Have a safe and democratic day.